watching The Producer's Room, a streaming web series featuring the creators behind the hit songs of today's music industry. Songwriters, music producers, and artists discuss their creative process as well as examining current issues and technologies in today's rapidly changing music business. Your host is producer, songwriter, and educator Dave Tuff. Welcome to The Producer's Room.
Hey guys, welcome to this episode of The Producer's Room. Today we're at Smoakstack Studios here in Nashville, Tennessee, owned by Paul Moak, and we're going to interview Paul, and I want you to hang out for a little while because later on in this segment we're going to tour the actual studio itself. But let me go ahead and introduce Paul and his background. Paul is a multi-instrumentalist and also a songwriter, in addition to being a producer and an engineer. And working here at his studio, he's produced artists such as Marc Broussard, Rhett Walker, John Paul White, Matt Maher, Will Hogue, Third Day, Joy Williams, Dave Barnes, Toby Mac, Matt Kearney, Relient K, and the list goes on and on and on. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Paul to the Producer's Room, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for letting us come to your studio and all that. So, we were talking earlier about the show and the concept of the show, the Producer's Room, and I was telling you it's not necessarily about how much compression you're using on something or what EQ. I mean, that matters, but we really want to get into the creative process. So I hope that we can do that, and later on we'll maybe listen to some of your productions and you can talk about your style. So a little bit about your background. You're originally from Mississippi, and that's
correct.
And then when did you make the move to Nashville? Or maybe you want to talk about your early years. Were you playing several instruments? I noticed sitar was on your resume.
I wasn't playing sitar in Mississippi, that's for sure.
Blues sitar.
Yeah.
Were you playing at a young age down there? Was your family musical?
Yeah. I wouldn't say that I came from a musical family. They love music and loved listening to it, but my sister took piano lessons, and I wanted to be like her because she was older, so I asked my parents if I could take piano lessons. And so from an early age, I was definitely exposed to it, and I loved music, but it really didn't grab a hold of me the way that I knew it was like, this is what I have to do with my life, until I won a guitar off the radio, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
And how old were you when you won that?
14 or 15, or maybe a little bit younger, but the local station, there was like the rock station in town, classic rock station, was, this will show my age, they were having a competition to show how fast the Yellow Pages were.
Wow.
Because they were trying to push this Yellow Pages into the town I was growing up in, and so they had a call in. If you're the ninth caller, they'd ask you to look up Joe's Plumbing Service, whatever. And I was like, I got to win this guitar, because they said they're going to have a guitar, package or whatever. And so we had two phone lines at the house, because this was the '90s, and I had a sister, and my dad wanted people to be able to call the house, so he gave her her own line. So I got on her line, and my mom was in the kitchen, and I had a little radio, and I just kept getting a busy signal, and they said, we've got somebody. We have Jean Moak. And I was like, and I ran down into the kitchen, and she was flipping through the Yellow Pages.
Really?
She won the guitar, and it's from this place called Marson Brothers Music.
Yeah.
And it was a PV Predator, which is funny you said PV earlier. And it just changed everything for me, man. I came home and I thought, this is it.
Yeah.
It was like kind of the clouds parted, and
hopefully you got at least an amp to play through, right?
Well, I had a little keyboard amp.
Okay.
For a little keyboard that my parents had bought me, and it sounded terrible, but I thought it was like the best thing in the world. But I ended up working at that guitar store.
Wow.
And that was what really kind of started my love for different sounds. And there was two older guys that were kind of in charge of the guitar department. And it was just a mom and pop music store.
Right.
But it was so cool, because after hours they'd be like, hey, grab that guitar. And I'd grab a guitar I could never afford.
Yeah.
And plug it through an amp with, and try out a couple of pedals, and we would just jam after work, and it really kind of opened my eyes to like, okay, this is what a Telecaster sounds like.
Sure.
This is what, and I started thinking, man, I want one of these, And,
so it sounds like you had some mentors. Was it a smaller town? Was there a lot of musical places to play or opportunities?
No. the thing, and the main reason I kind of ended up here is, my dad was kind of like, the end result, if you stay in Mississippi, is being in a bar band.
Right.
Right. And Mississippi is a very artistic community. I mean, the literature that's come out and the writers, from Eudore Welty to the guy from Oxford that, his name's, my parents are going to kill me for forgetting, but right. A ton of different authors. William Faulkner.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know he was from Oxford.
And then, or I don't know if he was from there, but he lived there a majority of his life, and his house is still there. But and then you have the blues music, obviously.
Yeah.
But in terms of an active music scene now, where people could be there and make a living.
I mean, did you know that you can make a living when you were young? I mean, were you aware
yes, because
of
of MTV.
Right, there you go.
MTV really was like school for me, kind of, because I would come home. I had this guitar I'd won, and it was right at the birth of kind of a guitar renaissance, if you will, with like all the stuff coming out of Seattle,
right?
And, the Toadies and Nirvana and the Pixies and Pearl Jam, and I kind of latched onto all of that, and to me, none of that sounded like what was in my home, and really it was kind of my family that pushed me to
That's
move.
awesome to have an encouraging family like that, yeah.
And so the day I, graduated high school and then moved up here and been here ever since. So, and it was a different town back then.
So you're moving up here. Well, you're listening to all that rock, and then you moved to Nashville mid '90s, late '90s.
Yeah, '98.
And so, was the Garth Brooks thing on the downslope, or was it still?
I actually saw Garth Brooks in Jackson.
Really?
Jackson, Mississippi was like the D-list route of your tour. It's like if you were a major artist and you did all the major cities, and then you went back and did the
You're so tired.
And it was like, let's milk it for one more, and I saw him in downtown Jackson, and it was pretty life-changing because, I
mean, that's a live show. I mean, that's one of the best
live
shows.
And he modeled all of his stuff after Kiss and, the rock thing, and I think he smashed 3 or 4 guitars the night that I saw him. So it definitely was life-changing.
So, but to me, even now in the Nashville scene, you're one of those guys that's breaking ground. And we were just talking about it. I was like, I love to interview guys like you that are breaking new ground in different genres and styles. But it wasn't like that when you moved here. Did you have to fit into the box, I guess, or did you kind of plow your own way through being a musician, engineer?
Yeah. I personally feel like I've never had 2 feet in one particular genre. And I've always personally felt like I was never really accepted in any genre.
Right.
There are people that probably argue with that, but maybe that's just the artist inside me that feels, like you're always on the outside. But for me, when I first moved to this town, it was a very polarizing place.
Right.
I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I love playing a lot of different instruments. But this town at the time was very quick to be like, oh, he's a guitar player.
Just that they'll peg they'll pigeonhole you for that one thing.
And then to even go further, it would be like, well, he's a guitar player that only does road work versus a guy that's in the studio. And thankfully, we've come a long way where I work with musicians all the time that they'll get hired to play drums on one record, and then the next day they're playing bass on another. Yeah. So I think. It just took a long time, I think, to kind of find myself and be comfortable, and I'm still working on it, be comfortable with who I am, to where you kind of find the community of people that you like working with.
Yeah. So did the musician thing, then the engineering was an outgrowth of that, or usually it's like one of the 2 skill sets you have and one grows out of the other, but or the producing?
Well, I had a little 4-track in high school and like a cassette deck, you know. And recording was always fascinating to me, but from an early age, I just loved playing. As soon as I found the guitar, I was like, who can I be in a band with, and when can we play?
Right.
So I played a lot, and then when I moved up here, I just got into several bands, and then became a touring musician for bigger level artists, and it was awesome. It was a great way I saw the world. I've been to 5 of the 7 continents and seen a lot. But, the higher up you get in that world, the more safety and security there is, because you're working with artists that are, touring entities that make millions a year. your job is to go up and do your thing
Right.
night after night. And I just was looking for something that was a little more every day is different, creative.
Yeah.
And
right.
And so when I would get off the road, I would make, little bedroom demos with my friends.
Yeah.
And it moved from I had that 4-track, and then my band that I was in, once I moved up here, we had a Roland VS 880.
Right, I remember that.
We used to play tracks
multi-track, yeah, and
on
you
the
could
road.
bounce like from.
So I started making demos, with that, and I lived in a house with, other musicians, and we kind of commandeered the dining room and the
That's cool.
The all the common areas to try to record stuff, and it really was a piece at a time, man. It was like, man, I'd love to be able to do a great acoustic vocal, and then it's like, well, it'd be awesome if we could add this, and it was just one thing at a time, and I've always just kind of listened to a record and found a sound and wanted to know, well, how'd they do that,
right?
And do I have something that can do that, or do I need, to find something that can do that? And
so did that lead to digging deeper? Like, did you intern or apprentice or work for any other engineers to learn how to get the sounds you were hearing in your head?
You know what? I was super fortunate in that, being a session for hire guitar player, I had immediate access to working under other producers. I worked in Abbey Road, worked in Ocean Way, Blackbird,
crazy.
Henson, the Hit Factory, all that stuff. And not only did I get to see how other studios were set up, but I got to work underneath other people and watch a certain situation and say, like, man, I really love how that producer handled that situation with the artist. And I didn't realize it all at the time, It just kind of, looking back, how I make decisions in the studio are definitely a process of all the stuff
I want to move into some of that, and then we'll come back to the timeline thing.
Sure.
But what, either unconsciously or consciously, what are some of the lessons, and you don't have to name names of the people that taught unless you want to, but what are some things you learned to do or maybe not to do that were effective?
I think the biggest lesson across the board from all the best producers that I worked for was how much they cared about the individual artist as much as the music they were making.
Right.
And the flip side of that really rears its head pretty quickly. If a producer's trying to steamroll his idea over an artist when an artist isn't ready to receive it, it creates a wall that kind of becomes the start of something that can potentially be a big problem.
Right.
And so just watching, like, Mike Hedges is a Irish guy that works in the UK, and he used to fly me over to England all the time. We did a lot of records together, and the amount of care that he had for the person, still to this day, and his dedication to the projects really just made me realize that we're here to make a record.
Right.
But it's also about the relationship between the producer and the artist, and the community that you have together. And when you're working in the trenches with somebody, a lot of what's going on in your life kind of starts to permeate the studio, and it's just realizing that even artists, no matter how successful or powerful they are still people. That,
That's great.
So
Very
that was
cool.
that was the biggest lesson. But like, I saw dudes throw stuff, and to me, I've just never felt like raising my voice or getting angry has really helped a session in any way. I think there's a way to encourage people. You got to challenge people. Sometimes artists are lazy, and they need to know that you're expecting more of them. But there's a way to do it that still shows them that you care about them,
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. See you soon.
Music is the most valuable thing that there is. People expect music to be free. It's like the air.
Every single thing you hear comes from the mind and the heart of a songwriter.
The only way we are able to make a living is by convincing people that this won't exist without us, and it is necessary.
ASCAP makes sure that we have a voice.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Producers Room. Once again, we're here at Smoakstack Studios here in Nashville with Mr. Paul Moak. And we were just talking about some things you learned with producers that you're working for as a guitar player. I want to get into some of your production process.
Sure.
Let's just pretend hypothetically that you get a new artist from a label. What are your first meetings with that artist? Talking about establishing a relationship, pre-production process. How long does that last before you actually go into the studio and start tracking?
Yeah.
Then we could start there.
Yeah, definitely. Every single artist is different. Every artist needs something specific to their own personality. But for the most part, I'll just spend some time getting to know the artist. A lot of times I'll write with them because it's a great way to be creative with someone and kind of test the waters, but you're not spending a record label's money or, or the artist's money if they're independent. And then we start going through songs and just kind of seeing if the body of a record's there, and if they're a band, what kind of vibe they want on the record. If it's a solo artist, like what musicians would we possibly bring in? And
are you guys discussing references at that point, or is that nailing it down too much? Like, I want to be a mix between this band and this band, or I want this drum sound, or
it's kind of dangerous ground because those can be helpful a lot of times, and then sometimes they can drive the process too much in. Like everybody wants to be whatever the artist of the moment is. Right. So I just really try to find out who the person is that I'm working with, and a lot of times it's from asking questions. Everybody's got a different definition of what success is.
Right.
So if you were the artist, I would say, what's success mean to you, and how is that something that is attainable for us in the studio, or is it something that you're looking for outside, like record sales or placement or touring or whatever, and just try to understand what an artist's expectations are versus what I can bring to the project. And the more time we spend together, the more you kind of realize, like, okay, I think this is how I fit into the equation. A lot of times with bands, they walk in the room and the sound is there because they have the makeup of the musicians, and my job at that point becomes really to get them to perform at an excellent level. And
so how do you do that? I'm curious. I want to dig more into that.
It's really just a lot of patience, a lot of practicing, a lot of
and then when is too much practicing, or when is it too much? When are they tired of it and all that?
Yeah, it's just a constant needle that keeps moving. Every band's different, but I will say, probably the biggest part of my job is knowing how to gauge that, so that when you're in record, they're at their peak. And there's a variety of tricks and rules and things you use in the studio. Like maybe the band has been practicing too much, and you leave the room, and then when you come back, they actually know it now, but they've got the freshness of playing it for the first time again. And then the flip side would be a solo artist that doesn't have a band. You usually bring in musicians that are capable of doing anything.
Right.
And so then it becomes less about trying to get a great take, because they're going to do a great take, and more about what's the vibe of this need to be, and how do you guys fit into that. And so the process, there's some guys that have their thing, and an artist comes in and you plug them into your equation,
template or whatever,
and then they come out the other side and it's like, oh, they sound like they worked with blah blah blah, and that's great.
Right.
I think I just really don't want to have that much of a sonic imprint on a record as much as an emotional imprint.
Yeah, I like that.
So I would like every record that I do to not necessarily be tied to each other by how they sound, but by the emotion that you get out of it.
That's great.
The feeling.
So speaking to that, and I know you have a team and you have a staff here. At what points are you taking the lead engineering, and at what points are you stepping back and just listening? And how is that important to your production process?
It's paramount. you know, I spent a very long time kind of cultivating this place and doing my share of engineering kind of out of necessity. But I'm really a song guy at the end of the day, and so I have the way I like things to sound, and these guys have great ears and they know what I want, and they make their own suggestions too, you know, and we kind of work as a team. But I spend more time out here than I do in there, which is probably different than especially a lot of Nashville producers. I just feel like when you're in the room with the artist, you can get more a sense of where they're really at than if there's a piece of glass between you.
I like that.
So even if I'm not playing anything, I might be out here while they're cutting a vocal, not to be like, perform for me, but so that they have a friend in the room, you know? If it's right. Sometimes I'll go...
Well, you know, what's funny is I just watched something about George Massenburg, and you would think he would be like the one guy that's always behind the console. He does the exact same thing. He goes out in the room. And,
that's funny.
Yeah. So that's cool, though.
You know, I truly believe that 95% of the sound happens before the microphone.
Yeah.
And so my job as a producer is to make sure that what's hitting that microphone is at its best, you know, emotionally, musically, all of that. And then the engineering side is equally as important, but if you don't have that performance, then it doesn't matter if it's the best microphone in the world, you know?
Right.
So that's kind of how we look at it.
Talking about the pre-production process a little bit more, since especially you're a song guy, how many times are you looking for outside songs, or is it mainly self-generated from the artists that you work with? And then my next question is, I know this is so ambiguous, but how do you particularly define a good song? Like, how do you know when a song's there or not?
Yeah. Well, I know for most of the artists that I work with, the songs generally come from within them and the people around them. You know, the whole Nashville thing of pitching songs to an artist is great, but it's kind of outside of what I do. I like working with people that kind of, they have a strong sense of who they are and know what they want to do. So most of the time it's either me and them, or them and a couple of friends that kind of write the record, especially bands. And then what defines a good song?
I mean, maybe I can think about you're writing with someone. How do you know when it's done? Maybe you could think of it that way. Like,
I think you know, to me it's always been like the hair on the back of the neck thing. You know, it's like if a song is so good that it makes you forget to check your phone, or kind of you lose yourself for a minute. You know, to me, in this day and age, if you can keep anybody's attention for, you know, 3.5 minutes, then it's probably a good song. Yeah. But for me, I always use like the hair on the back of the neck.
That's great.
If it's making me feel something.
Yeah. I've heard goosebumps and all that stuff. Okay, so at this point, let's pretend the things are tracked and you've gotten the takes you want to do. How much, in your particular production process, how much editing are you doing? Does it really depend on the artist? How much tuning, I guess? And then, are you going to mix it? Or are you entrusting another pair of ears to mix it? All those kind of finishing up questions, I guess.
Well, you know, the beautiful thing about the time period that we're in is you can kind of work yourself out of any situation in Pro Tools or Logic or whatever you're using. But the flip side is you can edit something to death, you know. And I'm a performance-based guy. I really try to get all the musicians in the room performing at their peak. And I feel like when you're doing that, you can capture something that's special. And yes, we could go in and we could record the drums to a click track and then line it up on the grid and then work for 3 hours with the bass player and stack it all. But to me, it might be perfect in the end, but it might not have that emotion and the human element, you know. And I think that that's the most important thing in the music that I love. And so, editing-wise, you know, we'll edit vocals. I'll do a lot of passes of vocals and kind of cherry pick the best parts.
Are you, when you're doing vocals, I'm jumping in here with another secondary question, are you eliciting anything from the artist, like maybe turning the lights off on one take or having them do something special on another take to get different things out of them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I always encourage an artist to, you know, I've taken lyrics off of a stand and said, don't read it, you know, sing it.
Yeah.
Even if you mess up, you're still not staring at a page, you know. Or, I mean, we've taken most of the gear out of the room and set it up to look like a bar for one guy.
That's
you know,
awesome.
You do whatever you have to do to make it work. But always just, the big thing is, especially vocally, but really with any instrument, there's a fine line between being present in something and then overanalyzing with your brain. And what I'm constantly trying to do is get people to shut their brain off and play from the heart, you know, and sing from the heart. And so between passes, we'll talk about, you know, man, you were a little pitchy under here. You really need to like shoot for that note. Maybe step back and, you know, or whatever.
Raise it up, yeah.
And I'll do that between passes, but usually the last thing I'll say before we do another pass is like, all right, now forget everything I just told you. Just sing the song.
Right.
And hope that subliminally those things are kind of happening in the back of their mind.
That's cool. That's cool. So, okay, then editing. And then I guess another question this begs is that I think we all struggle with Pro Tools, because you can add 200 things nowadays, is how do you know when everything's, you know, layered enough, and there's, you know, how do you know when the right amount of stuff's on there? Is it the same thing with the song as you just kind of...
man, and I'm kind of a less is more guy. It's like I want enough in there to be interesting and to sell the song emotionally, but thankfully I played on enough records where I feel like I don't need to just add stuff for my own benefit, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of, you know, you just do it. I kind of had my years of making records where I put in everything but the kitchen sink. And as you get older, you kind of realize, like, man, at the end of the day, you're selling an emotion, a feeling, and the lyric.
Right.
You know?
Supporting that vocal. And
whatever's in the soup kind of has to fall into those two categories, or it's gone to me.
That's great, man.
So...
That's great.
Yeah.
So then, okay, finally, everything's done, and you're ready to mix. When do you make the decision, hey, I'm going to mix this, or I'm tired of this, and I want someone else with fresh ears to mix this? Or do you ever do, does it depend on the budget? Or?
It kind of, I mean, budget's always a concern. You know, there's times where we're priced out of certain mix levels, you know.
And I said tired of it, I meant, you know, you've
tired of hearing it, not tired of the artist.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you know, I think generally around the middle of a record is usually where we start to kind of come up for air and say, like, oh, we got to mix this thing, you know?
Yeah.
And for me, by that point, I generally know, like, man, what we've got going has such a special vibe, like, this needs to stay here, and we just need to clean it up and make it happen. Or, man, we need someone to help us sort through this, you know. Usually, if it's a label project, I'll always suggest someone else mix it, because I don't want to deal with, you know, all of the nonsense of a radio team and all that. But for the most part, I mean, I'd say it's probably 70-30 of me mixing here versus taking it out. There's a bunch of talented dudes that I work with a lot, depending on the genre. And there's a freedom in having someone else come in and give their ears to it that I love. Yeah. It's just, you know, a lot of times with the budget these days, and just the fact that when I do stuff here, we get the ball rolling in such a way that a lot of times it's the artist that's like, man, I don't want things to really change from this. You know? So you just have to kind of take each circumstance and make a gut call, you know.
It's cool. It's cool. All right, guys, we're going to take another quick break, and we're going to be back, and Paul's going to discuss one of his productions and kind of lead us through it on our On the Record segment. We'll see you guys in just a second.
All right. The town has this energy. You never know who you're going to bump into.
We moved to Nashville, and I started singing in clubs 5 nights a week.
On any given night, you can go to the End and watch a show. You go to Tootsie's and watch a show. You can go to Exit Inn. You can go to the Ryman.
They're sick musicians and sick singers. It doesn't surprise me it's Music City.
Welcome back, guys. This is the awesome segment we call On the Record. And Paul's going to play us something, and we're going to talk about a particular recording that did you produce this, write it?
Produced it with a guy named Gabe Dixon.
Okay, cool. And write, play, or anything else?
Just produced this.
Okay.
I played acoustic on it.
Okay, cool.
But here, I'll go ahead and start the track.
Yeah, and the name of the track?
It's called Holding Her Freedom.
Awesome.
It's off his new record that's about to come out. And what's cool about this album is the whole thing is live except for the vocals. Gabe's fantastic piano player and musician, and we assembled a team of musicians that were partially people that he knew and partially people that I knew.
Oh,
it was a really good, unique balance. We used his drummer, John O'Ricks, who was in the Gabe Dixon band, who has such a unique way of playing, and brought all these like old quirky drum things in and like washboards and stuff, and just his own unique feel that he's been playing with Gabe so long kind of really matched up. And then Victor Krause on bass, who's you know monumental. Yeah, so he was playing upright, and a guy named Chris Donegan on guitar, and a guy named Jason Eskridge singing background vocals, and I played acoustic, and Gabe played piano, and this vocal might actually be from
off the floor.
Off the floor.
Yeah.
So we had him in the piano booth over there on the Grand, and the cool thing about this record is there was no click track ever on the entire record. It wasn't like we made a rule, it just never happened. We'd be working on a song and we'd be getting sounds dialed in, and everybody would get cranking and it would feel so good. It's like, all right, we just got to track this. You know? And so we did the whole thing to 2-inch tape and just pressed record and played.
Really?
So, some of these are like the first or second pass.
Wow.
And
so going back to the technical, with 2-inch, was that his decision, your decision, both of you guys together?
It was my decision, but he was definitely, I think the first Gabe Dixon record they did on tape, and so once I started talking about it, he was like, absolutely.
Then transferred into Pro Tools? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I generally, won't do vocals to tape because you just, it's time consuming.
Right.
But if you're just playing as a band, you got, time to get your passes down, and then we'll just dump them into Pro Tools and go from there.
And then just go back, like, where 30 Ips or 15? I mean, how much time did
15,
you have? Okay.
So we had about a half hour.
Yeah.
And the band never needed that much to get the song going, Now,
did I hear organ, or am I?
Yeah, there's some organ in there. I played organ. I think that.
So you didn't mention that.
I know. There might have been one overdub. Actually, the tambourine's overdub.
Oh, okay.
No, actually not. He had, he was playing stuff with this hand.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy drummer, man. Very talented dude. And then.
And I encourage people to go check out Gabe's background, his whole thing with touring with Paul McCartney and.
Yeah, he played on one of Paul's records, and just such a accomplished musician, So I'm excited for people to hear this. And
so in this situation, are you just? I mean, it just kind of seems like you're hiring the right guys and just letting it happen. You're almost like a casting director. Were there several takes you had to go through, or you're just kind of that's the take?
This one, every song we would have one where everybody's like, that's the take.
Yeah.
Yeah, it made my job a lot easier. At that point, it's really just making sure everybody's comfortable and being themselves. And that we're at the right tempo, right key.
Sure.
But yeah, definitely not having to
man. All right.
Fix a bunch of stuff,
I dig that. And so that you did track that here, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a great example of. I mean, we may move into the business side right now. I remember because I think I'm Facebook friends with Gabe that he actually did a Kickstarter or one of those pledge, and so I mean, just once again, an independent artist, and then taking it by the reins, and then finding you. Were you guys acquainted with each other before?
We've kind of been in similar circles. I've worked a lot with a bunch of the musicians that are part of 10 out of 10.
Oh, yeah.
And he's a part of that. But we met on a writing session and just kind of hit it off.
So that's going to lead me to another business question. How has the rise, especially in Nashville, it's like the joke is if you don't have a home studio, you're weird. But how, since you're a studio owner, an operator, how has that affected you, helped you, hurt you? in what you do, and how do you convince people to, hey, let's get out of your apartment and come to this big studio?
Yeah, you know, I'm kind of a product of both worlds. You know, I came along right when Pro Tools was getting inexpensive enough for people to have it in their house.
Right.
And but right at a time where all the big records were still being made on 2-inch, and I kind of fell in love with that process.
Yeah.
And really the difference in working in a large studio versus working at home that is, you know, really important to me is to have to come to work, be in an environment where a lot of other people's lives and incomes are dependent on your life and income.
That's a good one.
Know?
Yeah.
It raises the bar of what everybody's doing because there's an importance attached to it. And when you can walk out of your bedroom in your slippers into the other room, and it doesn't matter if you get the vocal then or later that night, and you have to apply your own set of pressure. And there's some artists that are great at that, you know, but
yeah.
So in terms of the rise of Pro Tools and home-based recording with me owning a studio, the answer to that is this studio doesn't make a dime. You know?
Right.
It really doesn't. It's tied to me and what I do. And if it didn't have the face behind it and the people's desire to work for me, if we were just trying to rent it out, it's a failing business model, you know. So I feel fortunate, blessed to be able to have a space like this, but it comes with a lot of responsibility. I mean, it's not cheap to keep all the gear up, to keep the air going.
Right.
And
heard those SSLs suck some power. Have you bought Reed's?
I love Reed.
Power supply
Reed.
Thing.
And I'm going to buy one of his power
Atomic,
supplies. Yeah. I have not yet. It's quite a.
I'm sure it is, but supposedly it cuts down on AC and heating.
It supposedly pays for itself.
Exactly. So we have this other section called, and I'm going to take you by surprise because I love to do this with everyone. Okay. It's called Rapid Fire.
Okay.
And I just ask you some just random questions. Here's my first one. 3 to 5 desert island albums and why? You're stuck on a desert island, you get 3 CDs.
Okay.
And why?
The Joshua Tree.
Okay.
U2 has just been with me my entire life, and that record, especially as a guitar player, the age that I was and the time, really just still speaks to me. It's like hit after hit on that record. 2, I know the band I'm trying to decide between 2 records. It would probably
well, you can name 5.
It'd probably be Nevermind.
Yeah.
In Utero is like my favorite album, but if it was a desert island situation, I wouldn't love In Utero if Nirvana had not put out Nevermind. And
do you think the tones on In Utero are better, but the songs on Nevermind are more solid? I don't know. That would be. Or no?
I can't go there, man.
Okay. All right. I feel you.
The songs on both are so special to me. Yeah. They're 2 different albums.
Yeah, they are.
You know, I like the production quality of In Utero because it's its own thing. But you know, when I'm in my car and you know, it smells like Teen Spirit comes on, it's like I'm gonna crank it and rock out.
Yeah.
So that's just
great.
one, you know. Yeah. And then pick your Beatles album.
Sure.
I mean, for me, Revolver.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd probably be
it. That's good answers, man.
Thank you.
Okay, so now because I know you're a songwriter, so I have a few of these. So, favorite song about a character or a person. So, like either someone's name in it. So maybe Eleanor Rigby.
Right. I was gonna say for the benefit of Mr. Kite.
There you go, Mr. Kite. That's a good one. He got that off the poster. Okay. Here's another one. Have you ever owned any inflatable furniture?
I have to say yes.
You have? What was it?
It was a college, I don't know, single chair, lean back situation, like very beanbag kind of vibe.
Nice. Did you ever get popped by someone?
I don't think it lasted long. We bought it so we could all play GoldenEye on Nintendo 64.
Nice.
Bought a bunch of them. And I don't think they lasted a week.
I'm sure they didn't,
so.
Unless you moved it to the pool. So. Yeah. All right, so this last one's a combo question, and then we'll get off the rapid fire. But What are you afraid of, and what are you best at? Or you can flip in. What are you best at, and what are you afraid of?
Well, that's intense.
Yeah,
in music or in life? Because those are two different things.
This is open-ended, man.
I'm afraid that the devaluation of recorded music as in terms of making money is going to prohibit future Kurt Cobains and
that's definitely a valid
Beatles from having. They will always make music. I just want bands to be able to have the impact that they did when I was receiving music. You know, I lived in Mississippi, and in order for a song to make it all the way to where I lived, it had to be huge. You know.
Yeah.
And now we just live in a different era, and I'm not saying that people need to go back to paying $15 for a CD because that's gone and done with. But I want future artists to have a chance to really grab the world with their music, and that's my fear is that they won't.
Yeah.
What was the flip side?
Oh, I said, what are you best at, or you could even say, I could even say, what opportunities are you looking forward to in the next few years? You know, I mean, we're talking about the dark stuff now.
Yeah. The opportunities that I'm looking forward to are maybe, hopefully, being a chance for people that are in this new wave of, you know, there's only a few labels left, you know, at this point.
Right.
To really have access to a world-class gear, world-class recording space, to be able to make a record that could potentially fill that void that I'm talking about. You know?
That's cool.
I feel like I've spent my whole life kind of preparing myself to find artists to work with. You know? And that's what I'm excited about.
No, that's great, man. So I feel like we've covered all the bases, but I do have a few more kind of these deep questions to ask you. So let's do it, man. So can you name a couple mistakes, maybe one or two, you've made in the past that you could encourage others not to make, either in business and life?
Yes. Absolutely. The number one mistake that I've made through the years is getting too emotionally involved in a project, which is hard to do.
Yeah.
To the point where you think that it's your project as opposed to the artist's project. You know, but until you're ready to stand out on stage and sing those songs, you're subservient to whoever is going to do that. And you know, when you spend a couple months of your life working on a record, it can become easy to get, no, I know this is right. This is what we should do. And I, you know, got burned a bunch of times and kind of realized how to have a healthy balance between making music is a fun and awesome part of my life, but it does not completely define who I am.
That's great, man.
And I can have a life outside and friends outside of work. That was a hard lesson for me to learn because my identity for a long time was in music. It's the first thing that I found in my life that I really connected with. You know?
Well, let me flip it one more thing, and this may be answering the second side of that question, but the best piece of business advice you've been given, or either you learned along the way or you've been given by someone else, as far as music business, let's say.
Well,
or there could be several. I mean, if you want to name several, but
there was a buddy of mine named Tim Lauer, who's a fantastic keyboard player and multi-instrumentalist, and has played on the show Nashville and 1,000 records, and he did a Q&A thing at a university one time in a music business class, and the first thing he did was say, okay, now how many of you want to do music in here? And everybody raised their hand. He said, how many of you have a backup plan? And a couple people raised their hand, and he said, you guys should go ahead and do your backup plan. And it's honestly great advice, because the thing about music is, unless you're willing to let it be your life for a time period and really kind of consume your thoughts, your time, your money, all of that, you have to be in 110%. And most people do. I've said this before, so if you've heard it before, I'm sorry. But most people do music because it's fun. And then it gets to a point where it gets hard, and then they stop doing it. And that's okay, because music can be enjoyed on any level, from just listening to, you know, some 80-year-old woman that plays piano at her church on Sundays. You But if you want to do it to the level and on the playing field that I've chosen to do, it's a lifestyle choice, you know, and you got to be willing to have tough days, man, tough periods. You know, one thing you'll be like everybody's favorite dude, and then the next time everybody's like, well, we just used him, you know.
Yeah.
So
cool, man. That's a great place to end it. And we're going to now take a quick tour of Smoakstack. I hope you guys enjoy it. But let me give you a fist bump. Thanks so much for once again being on the show. And we're going to get up and walk around this beautiful place. So,
all right.
And let me give a quick plug for the studio. Can they find you, before we start walking around, can they find you at
it's
website?
paulmoakmusic.com.
Cool, and they can see pictures of the studio there and all that good stuff. All right, guys. Studio tour coming up. See you in just a second.